Imagine a world where speaking truth to power could cost you everything: reputation, safety, and even life.
Hey, what if we go public, plaster this story all over the internet?
In 1776, what we now call the United States of America stood on the cusp of an irrevocable decision: remain under British rule or assert independence and risk war.
Of all the ideas that became the United States, there's a line here that's at the heart of all the others. People don't talk that way anymore.
No idea what you said.
It means if there's something wrong, those who have the ability to take action have the responsibility to take action.
What?
Declaration of Independence.
This episode tells that story, not for nationalism's sake, but to recover what the founders created, and did they fail to live up to them, what they were building toward, and what that means for us now. Now let's talk about the seeds of discontent. Early colonies and self-governance. The land that would become the United States had been inhabited by the traditions of the natives that lived on the land, also could be known as the Native Americans and so on. The nations for many thousands of years. European colonization began in the 1600s, with Jamestown itself founded in 1607, May 14th. 13 British colonies developed, each with their own local governments. Over time, colonists grew used to a measure of self-government and the protection of rights, however imperfectly implemented, under common law, colonial charters, and etc. Now, with this increasing tension with Britain, after the French and Indian War that ended in 1763, Britain had large war debts and sought to raise revenue in the colonies. The newly imposed taxes and acts, such as the Stamp Act that was in 1765, the Townshend Act in 1767, and etc., provoked resistance. Many colonists believed that Parliament, particularly taxing without representation, was violating their rights as Englishmen. Then, of course, the most famous of the couple that came in history, events like the Boston Massacre that was in 1770 and the Boston Tea Party of 1773, heightened tensions. Colonists felt that their liberties, homes, and economic well-being were increasingly under threat from a distant power that did not share their interests nor values. The pamphlets and the political writings circulated. Among them, the most famous was The Common Sense by Thomas Paine. The cat just knocked over the pillow.
Don't change the subject!
Great. It helped shift... I fixed it. Pamphlets and political writings circulated, among them the most famous, Common Sense by Thomas Paine, which was made in about early 1776, was clear, accessible, emotional in favor of independence. It helped shift public opinion toward the possibility that separation from Britain was not only inevitable, but morally right as well.
My sweet, submissive subject.
So let's talk about some of these histories, these dates, the steps to the Declaration, the spark of declaring independence. On January to June of 1776, growing calls for independence in the colonial pamphlets and from colonial assemblies. From June 7th of 1776, the Lee Resolution is introduced in the Second Continental Congress by Richard Henry Lee of Virginia, declaring these united colonies are, and of right, ought to be free and independent states. June 11th of 1776, Congress appoints the Committee of Five to draft a formal declaration. Thomas Jefferson of Virginia, John Adams of Massachusetts, Benjamin Franklin of Pennsylvania, Roger Sherman of Connecticut, and Robert R. Livingston of New York. From June 11th to the 28th of 1776, Jefferson writes the first draft. Adams and Franklin review and offer revisions. Congress debates over the contents. On July 2nd of 1776, Congress votes on the Lee Resolution. 12 of the 13 colonies vote for independence. New York abstains. July 4th of 1776, the Declaration of Independence is formally adopted by the Continental Congress. John Dunlap prints the first broadside copies. The title, The Unanimous Declaration of the 13 United States of America, is used. What the Declaration says. The document begins with philosophical grounding, human equality, rights given by Creator or nature, government's role to secure life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, deriving its just powers from the consent of the governed. These were bold ideas at the time, radical in terms of politics. Then a long list of grievances against King George III. Taxation without representation, interfering with colonial laws, quartering troops, cutting off trade, and more. These were the specific accusations that the colonists held as evidence of tyranny. It ends with the formal declaration. Colonies now regard themselves as free and independent states, no longer under British rule. Political connection dissolved.
Send a fully armed battalion to remind you of my love.
After the Declaration, war, nation building, and contradictions. The War of Independence and international recognition. Once independence was declared, war was fully underway. It had begun earlier in skirmishes. Colonies, soon states, had to raise armies, secure supplies, and hold territory. George Washington had then been appointed the commander-in-chief of the Continental Army. Foreign aid, especially from France, was crucial. Once the Declaration was out, France saw an opportunity. Recognition by foreign powers helped the colonies win the war. The war then concluded in 1783 with the Treaty of Paris. Britain formally recognized American independence. Founding documents and government structures. While declaring independence was essential, building a stable government was harder. The Articles of Confederation that were adopted in 1781 created a loose union of states with a weak central government. It struggled with issues like taxation, interstate commerce, and foreign diplomacy. By 1787, the Constitutional Convention met in Philadelphia, drafting the U.S. Constitution, setting up federal structure, separation of powers, checks and balances, etc. Ratified by enough states, it took effect in 1789. Contradictions and unresolved issues. Many of the founders owned enslaved people. If you did not know this, slavery was not abolished. In fact, some parts of the Declaration's original draft addressed the issue, but clauses criticizing the slave trade or slavery were removed for political compromise. Women, indigenous peoples, and many non-white colonists were not fully included in the all men are created equal in practice. The founding ideals set a standard, but the journey toward fulfilling them was and is uneven in a lot of ways. There were localization tensions, the balance of state sovereignty versus the national unity, equal representation, rights of religious minorities, and so on and so forth, etc., which had to be negotiated in the Constitution and other laws, highlighting freedom of religion, freedom of practice, freedom of unity, freedom of equal representation across the board, freedom of speech, so on and so forth. Here are some of the most important people to know, with some brief portraits, the key figures. Thomas Jefferson of Virginia was the principal author of the Declarations, deeply influenced by the Enlightenment ideals, natural rights. John Adams of Massachusetts was a strong advocate of independence, helped edit drafts, and was a diplomat. Benjamin Franklin of Pennsylvania was an elder statesman, helped mediate, made edits, active in foreign diplomacy. Roger Sherman on the Committee of Five, also later delegate to the Constitutional Convention. Robert R. Livingston of New York on the committee, political leader in New York. Richard Henry Lee of Virginia introduced the Lee Resolution for Independence. George Washington was the commander-in-chief of the Continental Army and appointed first president of the United States of America. James Madison, later central in the drafting of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And all the signers of the Declaration, including some of 56 men, each risking their lives, property, reputation, some paid dearly in war, loss, or even persecution. And there may have been others that we do not know that were a part of this declaration. The timeline of the major events, the founding era. Here is a condensed timeline to help everyone track how things unfolded. In 1607, Jamestown was the first permanent British settlement in North America. In 1620, the Pilgrims land at Plymouth. Early ideas of covenant self-government. In the mid-1600s to the 1700s, 13 colonies grow economics, societies, law, local governments, tensions with the Britain Empire increase. In 1764 to 1774 was the Sugar Act, the Stamp Act, the Townshend Acts, the Boston Tea Party,
Cry in your tea which you hurl in the sea.
the Intolerable Acts, creating the cycles of protest and repression. In 1775, the Battle of Lexington and Concord, formation of the Continental Army, the early skirmishes. In 1776, there was the Lee Resolution on June 7th, the Committee of Five appointed, the Declaration drafted, the Vote of Independence July 2nd, the Declaration adopted July 4th, and the signings to begin August 2nd. 1781, Articles of Confederation were adopted by all the states of the United States. The 1783 Treaty of Paris ends Revolutionary War. Britain recognizes America and its independence. In 1787 to 1789, the U.S. Constitution was drafted in 1787. The states were ratified. The government was under Constitution beginning in 1789. The heart of the American promise. What America was built on. What emerges from this history are several enduring truths, promises, in quotes, if you will, that continue to shape and challenge us. Number one, the belief in inherent human dignity and rights. The founders asserted these certain rights are not granted by government but inherent. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Government's role is to secure those rights. This is a spiritual as well as political creed. Number two, consent of the governed and the self-governed, that people should have a say in their laws. Representation matters. Authority must be accountable. This was radical in 1776, and it remains a litmus test for freedom even today. Number three, the courage to act under risk. Declaring independence meant war. Many who signed risked everything, property, exile, and even their own lives or the lives of their family. The founding was not safe, nor was it comfortable. Number four, it was a work in progress. The ideals were not fully realized in 1776. Slavery, inequalities, disenfranchisement, many things were left unresolved. The instructions that the founders left required later generations to continue the struggle for full and entire justice in integrity and authenticity. So, how the Declaration endures for us today. The Declaration remains a source of moral and civic inspiration. Phrases like, quote, all men are created equal, end quote, are not stagnant. They serve as goals to strive toward. The commitment to rights and justice has continued through many movements: abolition, civil rights, women's suffrage, labor rights, civil liberties. The founding story reminds us a nation is born not just through laws and treaties, but through shared purpose, ideals, sacrifice, and imperfect people trying to do better. So let's lift the spirits. On July 4th, 1776, America declared itself free. Not because it was perfect, but because its people believed in something greater than fear. The founding of this nation is rooted in hope. hope that liberties might be protected, hope that people could govern themselves, not by the whim of a monarch or by an overarching leader, but by laws made with consent. Hope that equality, though imperfectly realized, would be more than just words, that they would be actions. For us in the present day, that legacy asks, what will we declare independent of inside ourselves? What kind of nation are we building now? Is it closer to that promise or further from it? You decide. This has been a special episode of Kiara's Spirituality podcast. Just as the Boston Tea Party did, may we spill the tea of knowledge and further educate ourselves on what we are building in our reality, and take action in fighting for our values, beliefs, mental health, and integrity in the highest good of all. May you ignite your inner flame. May we make the choice to give our nation, ourselves, a declaration. And may that declaration be through knowledge and understanding what that means.